of employee actually being unemployed, and it's like we have to kind of like turn to other form of business or other form of income, to be able to, to make it possible for us to continue with life. So that there are also helpline made available for for people with disabilities in the country. And we could always kind of like be connected or request for help, or kind of like you kind of you can share, it's like your situation or the help that you needed for that moment. So that is actually being made available by the government, and that is actually being supported fully for the sake of the nation. So in the year 2021, during the national budget announcement, government has agreed to give a free laptop to approximately about 500 students. 500,000 students in the country. So this is basically focusing on education per se. But unfortunately, during the announcement, the numbers of the figures that they obtained did not actually include students with disabilities. So on the other aspect, where the education TV taken up by the Ministry of Education, they make sure that the 1,500 episode that is actually been made available for children with disability to follow through online has got sign language interpreting services. So in that context, when something been overlooked, or when the very beginning, when they wanted to give free laptop, government has also make it like this obligation need to be extended, and they are also focusing in the situation of providing free gadget and data for the B40. The B40 group, you would be included of people with disabilities. And for the deaf students, it's like they've been given free Samsung tablet, for them to actually have their session online. And as like in our country also during this COVID-19, it's like kind of like hard to get interpreting services or interpreters to be made available physically at the destination that deaf people, at the location where deaf people need the sign language interpreting services. So in that context, a free iPad for BRM interpreters being given to provide the online interpreting services. So this, it's also been, government to actually provide like stimulus assistance for the target group, especially the B40, to actually assist them in upgrading their standard of living, and also to have sufficient meal for a day for a family. So with regards to education, we're looking at education. So if what I'm sharing here is like lesson learned, and the information actually been obtained from UNICEF Malaysia report of August 2020. So B40 group has actually been defined in our country are the most marginalized, or the group that are having very low income. And this group are actually very much affected during COVID-19. And, they're not only affected their income, they're also affected other, for their needs. And for the kind of like monthly income, for household, it has dropped to RM 1,000. And with that, it's like impossible for, the household head to actually purchase, gadgets for the child Yeah, if let's say they have 4 children who are at home and following the education system, providing, I mean, they have to learn or having lesson available online. So it's like each and every one of them need to have this gadget in order to have access to education. And also, data is an issue. Yeah, it's usually at the rural area. It's so hard to actually have access or internet penetration. So when government say that the data would be supported to some, I mean the target group. So some of them at very rural areas, yeah, kind of like they have to climb up the tree. They have to actually find a suitable place where they could have access to the Wi-Fi or the internet to follow through with the online learning. So it's, back to the COVID-19 situation. Obviously, there are, during that time, and we as a deaf person, we're kind of like miss the information, yeah, and we're kind of like way back with whatever the current information, yeah, or the happenings during COVID-19. So making sure that, that Act 685, number 30 of the Alta OKU have actually provided or explained that the access to information or communication and technology. So during the beginning, obviously, it's like, yes, government agreed to provide access to information and communication for deaf people, but we realized that the access to TV, through media for information or for the news, yeah, it's kind of like very small in size for us to actually watch the interpreter signing or extending the information. So we advocated and we actually highlighted to media, yeah, another media station that they could do better by providing a larger, a bigger size of sign language interpreter without the box, so that we could actually have access, to have access to the information very clearly. So after the discussion that we had with the Commission and Communication of Multimedia, based on the guideline in accessibility for people with disabilities on as a viewer. So we say that these TV media or stations should actually follow this guideline where they have to provide kind of like the picture of the sign language interpreter got to be like the visual got to be larger so that we can have access to it. And the situation currently and also going forward, yeah, but it's always the case that sometimes we keep asking, yeah, it's like, how can, how this thing's been advocated. So it's like the involvement of the stakeholder or people with disabilities to have this interaction session with the government is actually the best solution, because under the People with Disabilities Act 2008, so it's actually been mentioned there very clearly, like, that active participation and involvement of people with disabilities in the decision making at national level is a must. Yeah, so we are also part of the discussion group or the technical working group and all. Yeah, on human rights issues, on education, on employment, and social protection. Because when you talk about social protection, having access to extra incentive, having access to having insurance and everything, we as a stakeholder would always question, the service provider, or the government to see that what it's in for people with disabilities. So we have to actually be strong in order to actually fight for our rights. And on that agenda also, we have our senator yeah, to be influencer for us, the people, I mean, people with disability, as she is a disabled person herself. So we actually keep our, continuously do the advocacy job, and we say that, we need more professional sign language interpreters be made available on media or TV stations and other places. So we actually make full use of, the influencer, to why, how, and to be able to actually create this kind of greater awareness. Yeah, because to us, like to everyone, I would just say that we have to continuously advocate, and we have to continuously fight using the all the United Nations instruments, yeah, the SDG, the CRPD, and also the rest of it, plus the own disability act that you have in the country. Yeah, so thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share with all of you. So I'll just end the session here.
Thank you very much, Encik Sazali, and thank you very much, Encik Sazali, for sharing all the experience and what's available in Malaysia. And I think it really highlights the importance that advocacy for PWDs should be across all levels, not just at a grassroots level, but spanning all the way up to the top, and having an actual individual with PW advocating at every level is so important. Now, last but certainly not least is Mr. Lim Pui Tiak. Doesn't need much introduction. He is a leader for advocacy for PWDs and the founding member of the ASEAN Disability Forum. He has served as the chairman of the steering committee since 2017 and is a board member of the International Disability Alliance. As a wheelchair user himself, Mr. Lim aims to make a difference in the lives of people with disabilities with the aim of empowering them to be contributing valuable members of society. Mr. Lim, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helena, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I know we are fighting against time, as well as a very good and heavy lunch for some of us. So we will take some time to give you some very broad sweeps. So on the next topic that has been assigned to me, I'm having some issues trying to navigate this sharing screen thing. So please bear with me a while. Okay, so the next topic that I've been assigned to me is on this assistive technology in the Singapore situation. But I felt that I need to come in very quickly to give you a very quick overview of what is the ASEAN Disability Forum. In this PowerPoint presentation, I just want to let you know that we were informally set up about 10 years ago in Bangkok. And we formed our secretariat in Jakarta in 2014, and we were registered as a legal entity in Jakarta under Indonesian law in 2015. And one of the biggest milestones that we have achieved so far is that we became an accredited ASEAN CSO since June 2017, and this opened up a lot of big door for us to get into the disability policy sector within the ASEAN Secretariat. And because of this, we were very actively involved in the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan, which the next slide will show you. The ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025 was a 3-year work in progress, and we met many times over the last 3 years. And the ASEAN Disability Forum was actively involved throughout the process. And it was really a very consultative meetings where we brought in expertise and members of national bodies that concerned with ICHA, with SOMSWAT, as well as ACWC, to make sure that the views of a cross sector and intersectionality was brought into the picture. And the master plan was adopted by the 10 ASEAN member states in November 2018, about 3 years ago, during the Singapore summit. And the master plan was launched about 2 weeks later in Bangkok as part of the International Day of Persons with Disability. And two big milestones that we're looking forward to is that between 2018 until this year, we're having the midterm evaluation review of the enabling master plan, and we need to see how all the 76 action points are progressing as far as the 10 ASEAN member states are concerned. And by 2025, we will be doing a final term, end of term evaluation of the master plan. So coming to the topic that's assigned to me on digital and assistive technology, I think we need not say very much more, emphasize the point that the COVID-19 pandemic has further marginalized people with disabilities in the following ways. And there are 4 very distinct reasons why persons with disabilities are being marginalized by the COVID-19 pandemic. Firstly, is a lack of access to information, healthcare facilities, education, and employment. And because of this, people with disabilities are further marginalized, are further alienated from mainstream society. And now we need to reclaim our rights to these 4 very important areas of our life. Persons with disabilities are further marginalized by COVID-19 because they are unable in many occasions to maintain social distancing. For simple and obvious reason, we cannot maintain that social distancing, and I think we need to make sure that special dispensation is made for them. Our blind friends need to touch surfaces and people, and myself as a wheelchair user, sometimes when I go up the ramp, I need to touch the railing to be able to pull myself up. So we have to constantly, as part of our activities of daily living, have to touch foreign surfaces that are not within our control, and therefore we are more vulnerable because of the COVID-19 pandemic dangers that's posed to us. And many of my friends with intellectual disabilities, with learning difficulties, as well as those who are autistic, they need a great deal of personal assistance and support. And because of this, again, they are further alienated by the COVID-19. So the big question remains: what about in a post-COVID-19 world? What are some of the implications, for them as we embrace the COVID as a way of life moving forward? These are some very common scenes and pictures that would trigger a memory in our minds. Commuters taking public transport on the train in Singapore, people having to be socially distanced and clearly demarcated areas. And then we have a wheelchair person. How is he going to be socially distanced because of the fact that although he's a wheelchair user, he also needs to abide by the COVID-19 safety management measures as well. Again, this is another very common picture that we see, in which digitization is being made use of to make sure that people remain safe, and although they are within the community, how are they being kept safe to make sure that they don't get unnecessarily exposed to the COVID virus. Things like the using of QR code, scanning it into your mobile using the app or using the token, checking in during safe entry, gatekeeping at every places that we go, even going to the neighborhood coffee shop or hawker center, or going to inside shopping malls. So while the world slowly open up, and trying to embrace COVID-19 as a way of life, some of these measures are necessary. And the big question again, falls into the into the minds of persons with disability. How are we coping with all these digitalization measures that are in place? I think embracing digitalization as the way forward will impact very severely on 4 different areas. Number one, access to information, and I think the world around us has been so ably as described by my 3 other panelists earlier. The whole world now changed in the sense that information is now easily accessible through digitalization form, through social media, and I think persons with disabilities have to quickly incorporate and embrace the use of infocom technology to become part of the mainstream society. And I think what is really impressive to me is the fact that persons with disabilities are already using digitalization as a means to cope with the challenges that this non-inclusive world is giving us. For example, my blind friends are able to use the Google map to help them to navigate around Singapore using the application, software application, and they can navigate the places around Singapore very easily. They know how to go from one point to another and find locations very easily. And they've been using this way before COVID-19 pandemic strikes. And the issue now is we need to catch up with such technology to make sure that other types of persons with other types of disability would be able to make use of such infocom technology to make them become more included and be part of a society that's quickly embracing technology as part of their way of life. Earlier, our dear colleague Sazali talked about education, accessible education, and because of the fact that many of us are locked down by the COVID-19, online learning, home-based learning is now another way of where children learn to be educated, way from as early as preschool age to even at the tertiary level. And the question now is, how can we embrace and use technology and digitization to make this as part and parcel of the learning process? Thirdly, in employment, where work from home is the default mode, and such default mode would not be possible if not for the fact that digitization, use of social media, use of technology like what we are tapping on now on the Zoom platform to conduct such virtual conferences. These are now the default mode, and I think we again have to make sure that such provisions are easily available to our users, so with disabilities, so that they can be plugged in to the whole mainframe of where they can work from home. And I think the last 2 presentations, if you don't mind me referring, are so impressive, because our friends with who are deaf can now tap on such technology like Zoom to be able to use this to be able to communicate so effectively to many of us here in this conference. And number 4, the impact of digitization on the COVID safety management measures. Earlier, we see how with the check-in systems and all these things are in place, and I think we need to catch up a lot on how to empower and enable our friends with disabilities to be able to use such measures as well. Here are some examples. For example, you see on the left side of your screen a supported employment program, whereby a lot of us are very familiar with, where persons with different types of abilities gather together in a supported environment to do simple work. And the question is, how are we going to maintain social distancing in such an environment? So many times during the COVID lockdown, these people have to be left at home, and parents, caregivers, and even supportive staff face added challenge of our friends there having to manage being away from their familiar work situations, and how can we make sure that they can really continue to enjoy some form of gainful employment to make them more economically independent. On the right-hand side is a mother trying to teach her child at home with special needs. And I think this is where a lot of resources have come in from the digitization process, whereby they can tap on the support system for resource teachers and all these things. So, and this is where I think a lot of parents are really concerned because how can they tap on to assistive technology and digitization to be able to ensure that their child with special needs are well taken care of. And I'm very quick to add that assistive technology for persons with special needs are actually very personal, has to be highly customized, and already we know there are so many types of assistive technology that's available in the market to enable children and persons with different types of disability to be able to communicate with the world around them. Like for example, those who are totally paralyzed and cannot move their arms to type, how can they use their eye gazing technology to be able to type the message that's available? And there's such technology is available. The question is it affordable? Things like, for example, playing games, having group activities for children with special needs, and even social situation whereby we go out to buy that simple meal. How can we then use, because nowadays with contactless payment, a lot of persons with disabilities now have to make sure that the mobile gadgets have the contactless payment mode to be able to make use and tap on to such modes of payment to embrace more technology and digitization in their daily lives. How can then we ensure that digitization is embraced by persons with disabilities? And I will share with you four thoughts whereby overarching provisions, because each ASEAN countries have their own ability to introduce digitalization and this technology at their own level, and I think each country have their own ability to provide such measures to people with disabilities according to their means. So I feel that firstly, we need to use the universal design and accessibility standards to improve the functional capabilities of individuals with disabilities in an affordable way. As I said earlier, assistive technology can be expensive because it is highly technical, it is highly customizable to the individual needs of the person, and unless it is made affordable, we are not able to make this more widely pervasive and to be made use of by more people with disabilities. In Singapore, we have what we call Assistive Technology Fund, which grants up to 40,000 Singapore dollars in a lifetime for a person with disability to tap on. Of course, it is means tested and is based on recommendations by the professionals, but persons with disabilities in Singapore can easily achieve and reach out and make use of assistive technology and digitization to enhance the activities of living, either communicating, employment, or basically trying to find a way to be included within the community. Second thought is taking advantage of innovative technologies familiar with persons with disabilities. I think we have earlier talked about screen readers, speech to text, artificial intelligence, and how to make sure that such technologies can better navigate the inaccessible digital environments. And I think this is something that takes a great deal in terms of not just capacity building, in which I think more infrastructure is provided, but also a capability building in which individuals with disability have to be taught and trained on how to use such technologies to further advance their way of life. Thirdly, I think we need to design products with accessibility for people with disabilities and allowing data to increasingly flow to accessible formats. Because at the end of the day, what is actually available is the mobile gadget that's in your hand. And I think as people become more mobile, move around quickly, how are we going to translate such technology and accessibility features for persons with disabilities to make it more portable and easy to use? Finally, I think we need to make sure that our foundational, the basic solutions that ensure persons with disabilities are taken care of in the digital world to enable more efficient agency operation and robust cybersecurity production. Because at the end of the day, it's not just communicating among ourselves, it's also communicating with our service providers, with our social network, and how can we make sure that these agencies are able to operate efficiently, and as well as taking into consideration a robust cybersecurity protection for all. Lastly, then, what are some of the learning points that I want to share? I think we should, number one, remember that inclusiveness should not be an afterthought. It must be involved from the very beginning. And I use the word PI to summarize the processes that are involved in our planning, in our implementation, in our evaluation of programs and services for persons with disabilities. So inclusiveness is not an afterthought. It should be planned from the very beginning. And secondly, is a multi-stakeholders engagement to ensure equal access and effective inclusion. I think the lesson is very clear, because the common saying that many hands make light work is because many of us realize that in order to achieve inclusion and effective inclusion, not only takes one person or one community, it takes the whole of everything. And I think many hands has to come in to play a part to make sure that this world is more disability inclusive for everybody. Thirdly, I think we need to think about how we can ensure a range of support services, human capital, and financial support are available to all stakeholders. It is not just talking about policies, because at the end of the day, when we translate policies into actual service delivery, it needs a lot of groundwork has to be done. We need to have support services. We need to make sure that the adequate human capital and financial support are there to make it real. Fourthly, I think we should not run away from the fact that nothing about us without us. This is the motto that persons with disabilities all around the world are following. And I think we need to continue advocating, as mentioned by our friend Sazali earlier, that we need to continue advocating for a disability inclusive world that we all live in. Thank you very much, and I hope to hear from you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim. That was a very inspiring presentation. And, you know, it really just highlights, especially with the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan, where we really have to shift the mindset of people now from one where inclusivity is not based on compassion, but it is the right of every person with PWD. So thank you very much for sharing that. We have 10 minutes for the Q&A session. And I'd like to take advantage of the fact that the panel today has a mixture of our youth advocates for PWDs and our veterans. So Mr. Lim and Encik Sazali. So my first question would be to Miss Laura, and I know she has to leave shortly. So my first question to her, because the COVID-19 pandemic has had a detrimental effect on mental health globally, I'd like to hear about her views on mental health support accessibility, particularly for the deaf youth community who may have, and most certainly, felt more marginalized during the pandemic.
Yeah, it's really interesting if we talk about mental health, especially for the deaf community. And if we talk about the youth the youth deaf people, there is no fully accessible that are provided here in Indonesia. 2 years ago, we tried to arrange things to think about the needs of deaf people in terms of mental health. Now, people nowadays more aware about this, and we have, but in this situation, probably we have less meeting on site, but we try to change the platform into online, so we have more discussion about mental health. We also have interaction or discussion more about this. We also here in Indonesia, we have several psychologists and also psychiatric that concerns about deaf people. They also did research about the situation of deaf people in terms of mental health here in Indonesia, psychologist. We have one deaf woman that works as a psychologist, clinical psychologist. So we have hearing people and deaf people here in Indonesia that starts to concern about the mental health of deaf people. We post, and also deaf people likes to have a conversation using live Instagram. This is very useful with live Instagrams. They have interaction. They post news also on Instagrams. They post things that they would like to utter through Instagrams, especially about mental health. So people more aware about this now. If there is no social media such as Instagram, if there is no video conference, I think the deaf people here in Indonesia will feel depressed because there will be no communication if there is no that such a platform. So I do agree that social media has a strong impact, and also we have TikTok now. We can use TikTok and use any kind of hashtag, uh, and especially in mental health. And I think that will reduce the mental health problem here in Indonesia. So this is the fact now that appears to happen here. Thank you, Dr. Helena.
Thank you very much for your answer. Yeah, I definitely agree that social media is such an important platform now for advocacy. My next question is posed to Miss Annie from Brunei. If you had a message for the general public, Miss Annie, to address the social stigma faced by PWDs in the country, in the region, either visible or an invisible disability, what would it be?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Helena, for the question. I'm on. Okay. To the general public and key stakeholders, I think please include in every. I mean, like, please do not treat the PWDs differently because we bring no harm. We are humans just like the rest of you. We also want to fully enjoy human rights. We also want to be included in the society. So do not exclude us in getting educational and training opportunities, employment, and other public services. We want full participation in all aspects of society, including decision making. So I think all the 9 DPOs in Brunei should also play their role in actively doing more educational campaign and or awareness to present factual information about the stigmatized condition with the goal of correcting misinformation or contradicting negative attitudes and beliefs in order to support the involvement of PWDs here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Annie. We have a question from the audience, which I'd like to address to Encik Sazali as well as Mr. Lim. It's relevant for both of you. And the question is, assistive technology is often very costly. What state funding mechanisms are currently being practiced in Malaysia and Singapore to ensure that persons with disabilities actually have access to these hardwares and softwares? That's the first question, which I'll address to Encik Sazali. And the second question is there a national assistive technology fund for PWDs in your country, which I'll address to Mr. Lim. So Encik Sazali.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helena. So when we talk about the participation or assistance support given by the state or the government itself, usually yes, during COVID and when you kind of like with a new norm, the approach is like everything got to be online. Yeah, so the needs of people with disabilities category also differ from one to another. So if currently it's like before this, yes, government do provide assistance for us. Like, you know, when we wanted to purchase the hearing aid, yeah, basically for the deaf, yeah, we get that support. And for the physically disabled, they need wheelchair, that kind of support and assistance been actually given, even for the blind with a white cane and all. So government would actually see into that as like, you know, the main thing. But now it's like with COVID, it's like totally, entirely a different kind of like switch. And we see the situation, it's like we need lots of support for the government when you want to actually have access to internet during this period of time during the pandemic. Yeah, because having to actually, I mean, like the fundamental thing needs to be filled, and it's not easy. It's like, you know, when you talk about all the categories, and we do realize like certain application, it's so expensive. You have to have for certain category, like, you know, for the blind, obviously they need lots of software and application in order to make it accessible for them. And it's like with the technology advancement now, with the government, I mean, like being more concerned of, I mean, the group of people with disabilities in the country, there are a lot of things that we can see that, you know, making sure that perhaps maybe some of the software or the application could be made available for free, and then making other facilities, yeah, could be made to a certain category of people with this support from through the CSR by private sector. So this is currently what the government is actually assisting.
Thank you very much. And I really go back to your point in your talk about using all the steering instruments that you have, for example, with the UNESCO, with the Salamanca Statement, or the framework for actions on special needs education, just using every instrument, every advocacy tool that you have to push for PWDs. So we have 3 minutes. So Mr. Lim, is there a National Assistive Technology Fund for PWDs in your country?
Yes, definitely. In Singapore, as I mentioned earlier, of course, Singapore has two very distinct privileges from the rest of the ASEAN countries. Number one, we are small. Our population is small. We have about nearly 5 million people. And even given about maybe 4 to 5% of our population are persons with disabilities, we have our numbers are quite, our persons with disabilities are quite limited. Secondly, we are resource rich, so we have the ability of tapping on government funds as well as a lot of civic mindedness, giving people in Singapore who are willing to support a worthy cause. So coming to that, we have an Assistive Technology Fund for persons with disabilities under the age of 60, and those who are above 60, we have a Senior Mobility Fund. And what happened is that under the Assistive Technology Fund, or ATF short, is that it is administered centrally. We have a central means testing mechanism, and number two, it is based on professional assessment. So your allied health professionals, like your speech therapy, the occupational therapies, or even your physiotherapy, will have to make sure that you are suitable for the device or for the gadget that has been prescribed for you. And you can tap onto this fund, and as I said earlier, you are given a lifetime grant of 40,000 Singapore dollars to make use of such a fund to tap on to purchase such assistive technology for your use. And I must say this, it is just for your personal use. Anything that deal with education is actually taken care of under the school system, special schools or regular or mainstream school system. So this is for your daily activities of daily living that is being used. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Lim. I'm sure we're very excited to see all the universal issues and barriers to inclusivity across the ASEAN region following what transpires in the midterm review of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan. So with that, we will close session 2. I'm sure you all agree with me that it's been such a fruitful exchange of knowledge. I've certainly learned a lot from all our panelists today, and it's definitely inspired me to personally continue to advocate for our PWD friends. So with that, I'll hand back to Tuan Effendi to close the session. Thank you.
Okay, Alhamdulillah. Thank you, moderator, and all of the panels for bringing us to a very productive and informative session today. Yes, for sure, developing an IT ecosystem that can address the scale of need also requires fresh thinking, I think. Increasingly, emerging technologies are suggesting ways in which we can respond to that need. New media, and especially social media, needs to be seeded with appropriate and independent resources to encourage awareness of and advice about assistive technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a short health break for 50 minutes. Please return to this room at 3:15 hours, and we will continue with the closing ceremony.
Pusat Ehsan Al Amira Al Hajja Mariam is a non-government, non-profitable organization committed to providing quality education and rehabilitation services for individuals with special needs in Brunei Darussalam. This year, ASEAN Disability Forum theme and plan, Prepare, Conquer resonated strongly with Pusat Ehsan. At the height of the second wave of COVID-19 pandemic, we as an organization heeded the government's call to comply with the Ministry of Health's guidelines and SOPs. Our practices have changed and streamlined to this new norm through teletherapy, online and offline education delivery, and psychological services. This pandemic has also affected our ability to raise funds at a level of pre-pandemic. In this challenging time, we reflect and review our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We think out of the box on how we can sustain our services in the short, medium, and long term. As Napoleon Hill once said, strength and growth come only through continuous effort. With our continuous effort, we are here to serve every individual with special needs with as much relevant supports, physical and mental development, and education at its best.
Persatuan Orang Kurang Pendengaran, or OKP, or National Association for the Deaf, is taking care of the welfare of deaf people registered with the association. Despite the pandemic, the OKP did heaps of activities focusing on care, repair, and prosper of deaf community in Brunei Darussalam. Before the pandemic hits Brunei, OKP was the champion of futsal tournament in Miri, Sarawak, and competition Brunei Futsal League. OKP cares the well-being of individual and families through Project OKP Prihatin, such as preparing and providing food and cash for OKP members from the 4 districts, Brunei Muara, Tutong, Damburong, and Kuala Belait. During the pandemic, OKP managed to collect funds from the members and public, providing food and drinks to the patients and frontliners in isolation centers in all 4 districts. OKP prepares class for the public to learn sign language so everyone can interact with OKP members. OKP also invited the government bodies to do sign class with Jari Jari Ku or JJK teams. OKP and JJK did 3 days full-time sessions with the public organized by the Ministry of Youth, Culture and Sports or Kementerian Kebudayaan, Belia dan Sukan or KKBS. OKP works collaboratively with local film producers and has managed to bring to the local and international viewers the film of Worm and the Widow. The main actor is totally deaf, and he was able to win the hearts of Brunei people with his acting. Together with the community, OKP care, prepare, and prosper. The Association for Paraplegic and Physically Handicapped People of Brunei Darussalam. The first video shows Alihan Muda, para-athlete from PAPDA Association in action in a shot put match at the ASEAN Para Games Manila tournament. The second video shows Awang Haji Nuri Shanuddin, one of the 10-pin bowling para-athlete from PAPDA Association, during his training to represent the country to the ASEAN Para Games in Singapore. The third video shows Dayang Naslaila, one of the PAPDA members, who was involved in business for dressmaking and tailoring. Special Olympics Brunei Darussalam, or SOBD. SOBD was founded in March 2004. SOBD conducts year-round training and sporting activities nationally and represents Brunei Darussalam in international and regional competitions and games. It strives to uphold the Special Olympics mission in changing the lives of people with intellectual disabilities and transforming the world through sports. The mission of the Special Olympics sport. Our oath. Let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. Special Olympics includes everyone. Celebrating victory. Developing friendship and creating everlasting memories. Creating awareness and promoting healthy athletes and fit families. Healthy athlete screening. Sports offered by SO Brunei Darussalam. Participation in regional and international games. 2019 Special Olympics World Summer Games at Abu Dhabi. In Special Olympics Asia Pacific and Regional Bocce Tournament Athlete Leadership Training. Fuad's interview with Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf Brunei. Training programs for teachers, coaches, and parents. SOBD Young Athletes Program at Schools and Community. Young Athletes Program at School. SO Brunei Darussalam Family Support Network. Play Unified. Welcome to Down Syndrome Association, or ABLE. The following are our achievements and activities. Activities at ABLE Center. The International Children's Day Celebration. World Children's Day Celebration. The International Day for the People with Disabilities Celebration. National Day Celebration. The World Down Syndrome Day Celebration. Hari Raya Celebration. Educational visit to Sakina Stingless Bee Farm. Educational visit to Sunflower Center, Miri, Malaysia. Learning Ladder Society for Children with Autism and Related Disorders. Our services are Applied Behavior Analysis or ABA Therapy, Natural Environment Teaching Therapy, Naturalistic Developmental Behavior Interventions, and Assessments. For consultancy and training, we have Parent Training, Teacher Training, Functional Behavior Program, and School Inclusion Support Program. Our team. Our senior psychologists are board certified and QABA certified. Together, the team of psychologists have more than 25 years of combined experience. Volunteers. Learning new skills. Having fun. Parent training. Staff training. Seminar for school teachers. Family Activity Day. If a child cannot learn in the way we teach, we must teach in a way the child can learn. It is our greatest joy to see a child gain confidence and reach their highest potential with therapy that is evidence-based and specific to each child. Helping the children develop new skills to be ready to learn at school or to discover the world of independent life is our goal. Brunei Darussalam National Association of the Blind, or BNAB, was established on 17 January 2001 with the aim to empower the nation's blind and partially sighted by striving to promote equality and full participation in society. More than 92 blind or visually impaired are registered under BNAB as of November 2021. Objectives: to promote the prevention and treatment of blindness and visual impairment, spread objective information about the situation of the blind and partially sighted in order to win friends and allies in the struggle for equality and full participation in society by the visually disabled in Brunei Darussalam. Keep the blind and partially sighted informed about their rights, about existing possibilities for assistance. Plan, establish, and run different kinds of activities and services for the blind and partially sighted of Brunei Darussalam. Improve the situation of the blind and partially sighted in the fields of education, employment, and culture. Represent the blind and partially sighted nationally and in international affairs. DNAB goals: promote proper eye care in Brunei Darussalam, empower the blind and partially sighted of Brunei Darussalam, spread awareness of challenges facing the blind and partially sighted in Brunei Darussalam, establish a community comprising of the blind and partially sighted of Brunei Darussalam, assimilate the blind and partially sighted into Bruneian society, and represent the blind and partially sighted in both national and international affairs.
Hello everyone, welcome to Smarter!
Smarter Brunei, or the Society for the Management of Autism-Related Issues in Training, Education, and Resources Brunei Darussalam, is a non-government and non-profit organization run by parents and family members, for parents and family members exclusively for individuals with autism, or the IWA. Smarter has developed its comprehensive social, training, educational, and psychological, or STEP program. It is a program that is eclectic, multisensorial, and holistic, that provides positive attitude, appropriate skills, and relevant knowledge. Highly structured, individualized program plan that is tailor-made to their interests and needs, and uses real-life activities in a real-life environment, and emphasizes and utilizes the importance of the Brunei extended family structure. Smarter has also developed a competency-based training, or CBT apprenticeship program, for 12 to 18 years old in shop assistant, office training, computer, electronics or electrical, baking, 3R production, bistro and cafe. It is a job skills certification program that provides the AWA a certificate of competency in specific skills needed for employment. Since 2018, we are offering high supported employment, low supported employment, and open employment. It's Smarter Brunei Bistro and Cafe, Smarter Kitchen, Smarter Washington Bakery, and Bijak Cafe. It is where Smarter Brunei offers real employment for all of our IWAs, giving them the opportunity to be chips, contributing holistic, interdependent, and productive members of society. During the pandemic, we have launched our online home program. It is to help structure the child's daily routine, incorporating living skills activities and integrating the Smarter's curriculum. Apart from this, Smarter Brunei also ensured to coordinate with the relevant agencies to provide assistance and support to all individuals with autism ages 12 years and above and their families during their vaccination.
I would like to welcome everyone back to our plenary session, and now we'll resume our closing ceremony shortly. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to extend our very warm welcome to Yang Mulia Datuk Paduka Haji Alimin bin Haji Abdul Wahab, Chairperson of the 11th ASEAN Disability Forum Conference 2021, Mr. Lim Poetiak, Chairperson of ASEAN Disability Forum, Ms. Mak Monica, Executive Director of Cambodian Disabled People Organization, CDPO, members of the Legislative Councils, our ASEAN representative and speakers, permanent secretaries, deputy permanent secretaries, NGO and members of affiliate bodies, distinguished guests, persons with disabilities, ladies and gentlemen. Malai Aila Surya binti Malai Haji Abdullah. For your information, she is a head reporter for the ASEAN Disability Forum 2021. She is a Smarter Brunei member since 2001, grew up with a sibling with autism and has an autistic son and many nephews with autism. She is an advocate for mental wellness and for acceptance of neurodiversity. Without further ado, let us warmly welcome Malai Aila Surya binti Malai Haji Abdullah to give announcement of the statement.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dan salam sejahtera and good afternoon. Distinguished guests, persons with disabilities, ladies and gentlemen. As head rapporteur, I've had the honor of listening to some truly interesting and brilliant discussions here today. Allow me to summarize the main themes from today before announcing the statement. The keynote address to the ASEAN Disability Forum was given by His Excellency Ekabab Bantavong, Deputy Secretary General of the ASEAN for Socio-Cultural Community, ASCC, and was truly inspiring and edifying. Entitled ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, Mainstreaming the Rights of Persons with Disabilities During and Beyond COVID-19. His Excellency remarked that the forum has brought together relevant stakeholders, especially different organizations of persons with disability. This demonstrates ASEAN's collective commitment to care for its people, as guided by this year's theme, We Care, We Prepare, We Prosper. His Excellency in his speech reiterated that ASEAN remains steadfast in its commitment to leaving no one behind, which is reflected in the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025 of mainstreaming the rights of persons with disabilities. The fundamental rights of persons with disabilities are critical to ASEAN's COVID-19 recovery and resilience building efforts. In summary, His Excellency stated that the COVID-19 pandemic has widened gender inequalities and deepened the digital divide, including for persons with disabilities. In response, ASEAN convened several webinars to raise awareness on the disability inclusive analysis and approaches as part of COVID-19 recovery efforts. The disability inclusive perspectives are included in the ASEAN Recovery Framework and Implementation Plan. His Excellency explained that Strategy 2 outlines broadened social protection for vulnerable groups and persons with disabilities, including removing the barriers faced by persons with disability. This is reflected further in the ASEAN Recovery Framework and Implementation Plan, which includes strategies to broaden social protection for vulnerable groups. His Excellency announced that in 2022, ASEAN plans to conduct a medium-term review of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025. This is an opportunity to reflect on the gaps and pathways to improve the implementation of the master plan. Cross-sectorial cooperation and strategic engagement with persons with disabilities is critical to realize equality and inclusion during and beyond COVID-19. To make the rights of persons with disability real, it is essential that investment is made in measures that will improve the success of persons with disabilities. In closing, His Excellency urged ASEAN Disability Forum to continue meaningful and substantive collaboration and cooperation with ASEAN sectoral bodies, civil society organizations, and other development partners to forward the fundamental rights of persons with disabilities as a human rights and cross-sectoral issue. Later that morning, we had the plenary 1 session. The first plenary involved 4 esteemed panelists and was a fruitful and robust discussion. Under the topic of enabling education towards employment amongst persons with disabilities in the new norm, a number of key points were highlighted. Allow me to summarize the key points made by each panelist. Ms. Mak Monica from Cambodia provided an overview of CDPO in Cambodia and then explained the 5 elements to successful employment of persons with disabilities, and also emphasized the need to be flexible and to work closely with the government. Mr. Tongshan Inkachak from Lao PDR talked about enabling education towards employment. He shared various statistics on employment of persons with disabilities before and during COVID-19, and sadly showed a high rate of unemployment amongst persons with disabilities. He mentioned that it is key to enable employment to redress the situation. And some of the guides that he proposed were flexible working hours, improving awareness of stakeholders on the rights of employment for persons with disabilities, and the integration of assistive technology in the workplace. Mr. Tien Han Tu from Myanmar highlighted that disability is not yet mainstreamed in Myanmar. The number of illiterate persons with disabilities is still concerning. The persons with disabilities employment within the community are mostly self-employed, and they have lost jobs. And so the government needs comprehensive implementation of disability law for inclusion of persons with disability in schools as well as the workforce. This needs to be actively implemented. Ms. Nguyen Thi Khoi Hao from Vietnam highlighted the high participation of persons with disabilities in TVET education and training. Employment among the PWD in Vietnam is high. However, the challenge remains that most are in informal employment and are earning very low salaries, if any. She further highlighted the importance of policies and implementation of those policies, but these are for the formal workforce, and there is still a threat of not being eligible for government social welfare support for those in the informal workforce. The government increased monthly allowance to combat the low salaries by providing special allowance due to COVID-19 and rice and other necessities to those who are unemployed. This truly encapsulates the government's efforts to ensure no persons with disability is left behind. Overall, all panelists agreed that COVID-19 has deepened the divides between the haves and the have-nots. Because in addition to COVID-19 challenges, the other very well-known challenges of awareness, equality, access to information, education, and employment were further enhanced and amplified, and still persist in the new norm. In terms of employability, as the economic recession continues to ravage the region, this has an impact on education and training, and also the uneven distribution of funds and even less funding. And it remains that persons with disabilities are the first people to lose their jobs, making them even more vulnerable. Therefore, the panelists recommended that we implement sustainable emergency response and recovery policies and activities for persons with disabilities to protect their basic human rights on education and employment. More work is required in the policies that are in place. And there is a call for more than awareness. There is a call for action. Then we had the pleasure of the second plenary session involving 4 panelists, which was indeed an inspiring and truly wonderful discussion. The topic was digital and assistive technology, active participation. From Brunei, Ms. Noorani shared that information and media are critical to be an inclusive society. Brunei is trying to focus on the standardization of universal design to increase accessibility of persons with disabilities. This includes the utilization of online platforms such as Zoom and Google Meet, interpreters to help with communication barriers in local news. And she further said that the COVID-19 pandemic has shown that if we want everyone in society, including persons with disabilities, to have access to vital, timely, and up-to-date information, universal design should be at the core of service and product development. So even as we look forward to post-pandemic life, we must continue to build on the lessons learned. We must continue to learn about how technology can connect all of us and address challenges. And key stakeholders should play their roles in bringing about changes for the persons with disabilities community to move forward to achieve the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025 to create a barrier-free community. Ms. Laura Lesmana from Indonesia shared that the teaching of sign language to hearing persons during the pandemic all went online, and they utilized online platforms, Google Forms, YouTube, and Zoom, to name a few. The teachers and management needed to learn the online platforms to know how to use them to teach sign language. So essentially, they needed to adapt and learn 2 new things: the platform and how to teach sign language on that platform. People in Indonesia are now more aware of the importance, and the government is also more aware of the needs of sign language interpreters or using closed captions. Even if with the absence of an interpreter, technology has been improving so much that it is no longer a true statement to say that we cannot provide accessibility. The technology is there. It is feasible. Then we had Mr. Sazali from Malaysia, who explained that assistive technology is any tool used by persons with disabilities to accomplish tasks in everyday life. For Malaysia, due to the MCO, people were working from home, and the government and corporations provide assistance for those in the B40 groups and those people persons with disabilities. But the main part of his presentation was that advocacy is key. Advocacy, using legislation as tools, we can make changes, such as holding the media to account, to use the guidelines for persons with disability as viewers, so that maybe they can have bigger screens for the interpreter, so that there is more access to information. Advocacy is important at all levels, not just at the grassroots level. And representation needs to be at the national level to inform decision making. Our esteemed panelist, Mr. Lim Pwai Tiap from Singapore, gave a very informative presentation about the overview of ADF, as well as their involvement in the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025. He argued that COVID-19 has resulted in further marginalizing of persons with disabilities, with a lack of access to information, healthcare facilities, education, and employment. Some because of social distancing measures. As the online platforms being the default mode, this has been a greater driver of embracing such current technologies and online communication platforms, and we should make this part and parcel of the learning process. Persons with disabilities are already using digitalization in this non-inclusive world. We need to catch up now to make sure that other persons with disabilities are more included when using ICT. Technology, however, is highly personal and customizable, and thus can be very expensive. We need to make sure it is more accessible to all persons with disabilities. Overall, the panelists covered similar challenges. Some of them were a general lack of awareness from the community and key stakeholders. Another was access to digital and assistive technologies. It just has to be easier, and it needs to be personalized according to individual needs, and then it must be affordable. The recommendations from plenary 2 are that we must embrace digitalization and adapt to change. Advocacy for basic rights on fundamental and foundational changes is truly key. Representation of persons with disabilities on fundamental at the national level to inform decision making. Universal design is at the core, because inclusion should not be an afterthought. Inclusion should not be an afterthought. What a wonderful statement. To achieve this, we need multi-stakeholder engagement to ensure equal access and effective inclusion. And we must ensure that there is a range of support services, because what are policies without the support services, the human capital, the financial support? They all need to be available for all stakeholders. And remember, nothing about us without us. That was the summary of the keynote address, plenary 1 and plenary 2. Now, ladies and gentlemen, persons with disabilities, our distinguished guests, allow me to announce the statement. We, the 10 founding and institutional members of the ASEAN Disability Forum, ADF, and the organizations of persons with disabilities, OPDs, whom we represent, attended the ADF conference, which was held virtually on Monday, 6 December 2021 in Brunei Darussalam. It was well attended by over 350 participants, representing a wide section of both international and local OPDs and their members, parent support groups, CSOs, and government representatives from various ministries. The ADF conference was organized by the Council for the Welfare of Persons with Different Abilities, MKOKU, of Brunei Darussalam, which is the umbrella organization for NGOs representing people with disabilities. It adopted the theme, "We care, we prepare, we prosper." The ADF conference coincided and commemorated with the International Day of Persons with Disabilities on 3rd December 2021 and received support from the Department of Community Development, DOCD, Ministry of Culture, Youth and Sports, Negara Brunei Darussalam, and ADF. The one-day virtual conference adhered to the ASEAN theme and the 3 priority areas of Brunei Darussalam's chairmanship of ASEAN 2021 on A, caring for the people and each other's well-being. The ADF conference examined the current COVID-19 pandemic's effect, among others, on the mental and psychological well-being of the OPDs and their members. Preparing for future opportunities and challenges. The ADF conference will continue to advocate for the provision of quality education, digital technology resources, and employment opportunities, as well as providing knowledge and skills needed to adapt to the new norms of the 4th Industrial Revolution and the new norms caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. C, prospering together as a unified region. The ADF conference will closely work with relevant stakeholders in ensuring OPDs and their members are in an inclusive society, receiving the assistance and support in the community, and by providing an opportunity to share their struggles, perspectives, and well-being in combating this COVID-19 pandemic against the backdrop of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, mainstreaming the rights of persons with disabilities. We therefore make the following recommendations to be known as the Brunei Darussalam Declaration. We call on all ASEAN member states with its agencies and sectoral bodies to adopt a synergistic and intersectionality approach while continuing with its efforts to monitor, evaluate, and implement the 76 action points of the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025, mainstreaming the rights of persons with disabilities towards achieving a disability-inclusive ASEAN community by 2025. A vision where persons with disability in ASEAN would be enabled and empowered to remain meaningfully engaged within their communities as equal, participative, and contributing citizens of their countries. B, the ASEAN Enabling Master Plan 2025 and its 76 action points should be the fundamental thrust of all 10 ASEAN countries in achieving a disability-inclusive post-COVID world, while addressing the problems, issues, and challenges brought by the pandemic that is now becoming endemic. As persons with disabilities are further marginalized and disadvantaged by the pandemic, quick and urgent measures must be implemented to level the playing field, specifically to address their fundamental rights to education, employment, and equality. C, adopting digitization and the use of assistive technology would further bridge the divide that has long plagued persons with disabilities and causing them to be left behind. Adequate resources should be provided to build greater capacity, like infrastructure, and capability, like training, to enable persons with disabilities to harness info communications technology, ICT, to better prepare themselves for demands of the digital age. D. Persons with disabilities and their organizations should continue working with their government and their agencies in advocating for a more disability-inclusive ASEAN community to enshrine the principle, nothing about us without us. Thank you very much for your kind attention and for the great privilege. I now give the floor back to Tuan Effendi. Thank you.
Thank you, Malai Aila Suryabinti Malai Haji Abdullah, for the announcement of the statement. Ladies and gentlemen, now we are cordially invite Yang Mulia Datuk Paduka Haji Muhammad Alimin bin Haji Abdul Wahab, Chairperson of the 11th ASEAN Disability Forum Conference 2021, to give a closing remark and officially hand over chairmanship of ASEAN Disabilities Forum ADF Conference 2022 to Ms. Mark Monica, Representative Country of Cambodia, Executive Director of Cambodian Disabled People Organization, CDPO.
Other government agencies, respected colleagues of the ADF chairman and other members of ADF steering committee and our friends and supporters in the ASEAN region, all our colleagues in MKKU, presidents and members of DPO, OPD, otherwise, co-workers and friends of this conference, parent teachers, careers, volunteers, and friends, our beloved people with different abilities in Brunei Darussalam in the ASEAN region. All things in life must come to an end. I have again the honor as chair of this conference to take the privilege of delivering the closing remarks. But first, words of thanks and appreciation, particularly in the presence of our guest honor, the two Minister of Culture and Sports, who has supported us in many ways in and outside this conference. He has led the ministry and his staff in supporting DPO or OPD community. Now CRPD can be said as having been mirrored in the local enactments. Also thanks and deep appreciation to those others who participated and volunteered to make this event a success in Brunei Darussalam and in the whole of ASEAN region. In this world of different abilities, as a parting note, we acknowledge that nobody is perfect. In the words of my dear parents, if I may say here, they always put it to us that they love us all equally, but always differently. Because we are different. It does not need us to grow old to realize that. So sincere apologies for all unforeseen, unforeseeable, non-intended mistakes and oversights we always strive to be a better persons and better partners and better colleagues, sharing the world, the only world we have. I have now come to the point of handing over the baton of responsibility of hosting the next 2022 ADF conference to Madam Monica of Cambodia. So if I may get Madam Monica to take, okay. Thank you very much, Monica. Now, it has been my privilege to host the chair the ADF conference this time. And so if I may ask Monica to accept the hosting of the next ADF conference in Cambodia.
Yeah, firstly, let's thank you, Brother Dato. On behalf of CDPO, we would like to accept for the host next year, 2022, for ADF conference. Thank you.
That closes our meeting, I suppose.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with this, our ceremony has come to the end. Once again, thank you for gracing our forum session today with your presence. We appreciate again for joining us long time with us. I hope this forum will be beneficial to all of the audience. On behalf of the organizing committees, we would like to say thank you for all of you. And furthermore, we would like to apologize if we have done any mistake through the forum and organizing period. Ladies and gentlemen, see you in the next ASEAN Disability Forum, ADF Conference 2020 in Cambodia. That's all for today's event. I'm Afendi Junaidi signing off. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh.